Presidents display leadership. It's what they're elected to do. They're given a job and a task by the American population, and faith is put into them. Whether it's 4 or 8 years in office, the President of the United States has a major job to do. Different points in time call for different leadership styles, and Lincoln had his defining moment with the Civil War. Some of his actions were very unpopular, especially when he took away the writ of habeas corpus and held prisoners against their will. Lincoln thought that this was a great decision, and though it was unconstitutional, he did it for the best aspects of the country. You have to be a leader, and that's what Lincoln was.
Without Lincoln, the world wouldn't be the way it is today. There would still be slaves being whipped. There would still be white men making fun of the black. There's no doubt in his mind that freedom was the way. His words resemble that of many other famous people, such as Shakespeare. The ballot is stronger than the bullet resembled Shakespeare. The pen is stronger than the sword.
Lincoln thought that we could compromise this situation. We did not have to go to war. We could compromise. We can work as a united team. The quote, "shall it be peace or sword," means we could work as a united team and we could fix this, or we would have to go to war. That would be our only choice.
After the Civil War ended and it was no more North and South, it was just one united nation, Lincoln still enjoyed listening to Dixie, a song of the South, because it had a really catchy tune.
There are 2 parts of Manhunt which I find really exciting. The first part of Manhunt, when John Wilkes Booth is about to assassinate Lincoln, Swanson does a fantastic job of creating a build-up. It reads less like a non-fiction story and more like an action or an adventure or some kind of suspenseful fiction story. And John Wilkes Booth's knowledge of that Ford's Theater, of every nook and cranny, Swanson is able to incorporate all of that into his writing. You actually feel like you're on the staircase climbing it with John Wilkes Booth. Same thing happens when Officer Corbett is about to pull the trigger to kill Booth at the end of the book. You feel like you're an observer in the woods because Swanson is able to build that up. You almost feel like you're a part of it. Right before Corbett pulls that trigger, you almost feel sorry for Booth in a way. And then, once it's done, you realize that Booth was a criminal and justice has been served.
I think the quality of the writing is exceptional, and Mr. Swanson writes like a mystery writer. And it's interesting because we all know the story of Lincoln, we all know his assassination, we all know who the assassin was, and we all know how it ends. But reading Mr. Swanson's narrative and description of those events keeps us spellbound, keeps us interested, and at the end of our scene. I guess my most memorable scene in the book is when Booth had been captured in a burning barn and lie dying in the arms of a Lucinda Barton, and her ability to comfort him, mop his brow, and most importantly, provide him with some fluid on his dry mouth. Mr. Swanson's description of that is exceptional. Talks about a dying man, his last words, and someone caring for him.
For me, the scene that was most memorable in Manhunt was sort of the events leading up to and the actual event itself on the day of the assassination. The comparison between the 2 days that Lincoln and Booth were having. Lincoln winding down with his wife at the conclusion of the war. Booth sort of ramping up throughout the day towards the event. And then the amount of detail that Mr. Swanson put into the event itself. Booth ascending the stairs, entering the theater booth, closing the door, making sure it couldn't be opened from the outside. The event itself, the subsequent struggle with the military personnel who was in the booth, him leaping from the booth and onto the stage, and his escape was just fascinating to learn about.
Cultural literacy is shared knowledge. Cultural literacy has come into my life this year when my 6th grader came home and told me that he had to read a nonfiction story. The story he chose was Swanson's Chasing Lincoln's Killer. And I was surprised that he chose that story because he doesn't talk about the history of the Civil War or Lincoln era ever, but his school was doing a 2-week thematic unit studying Civil War and Lincoln, and I was wondering if he was going to enjoy the story. And lo and behold, it was his favorite book of all times. I'm not kidding you, at dinner time, he would sit there and I would have to say, "Aiden, it's dinner." And he would lift up, "Mom, did I tell you about John Wilkes Booth?" And when he was chasing him, it was amazing. And then one time my father-in-law and my husband were sitting with him, and he got them so interested in Lincoln and the history of Lincoln that they went out and grabbed Manhunt and read it, and the 3 of them are just now Lincoln fanatics. In fact, it is now our April vacation is going to Washington, D.C. to follow Lincoln's past and learn all about Lincoln.
My favorite part of Chasing Lincoln's Killer was when John Wilkes Booth was in the burning barn, because it showed really how determined John Wilkes Booth was to get away from the Union.
It's kind of interesting. I've read most of all the works on the Civil War and visited pretty much all the battlefields. But you know, when my grandson Aiden Kilty told me about this book and how I could see how excited he was in reading that book, I had to quit that book. I had to pick it up and I had to read it and share the story of the book with Aiden. And it was a result of his interest in children's literacy and knowing about history. And I picked up that unique little book and went on to learn more about the assassination of Lincoln.
Lincoln reminds me of myself. Because I am smart like Lincoln, I'm tall like Lincoln, even though I wasn't raised in a log cabin, I still think I'm pretty smart for my age.